Hello and welcome to our second podcast, Sacred Wisdom with Connecting Consciousness, opening our hearts and minds and connecting with our inner wisdom and authenticity. And we are really pleased to have Grandmother Mulara and Sue Cimino join us again today.
In our last podcast, which was our very first, we gave rather long introductions. Today, we're going to give very brief introductions before we move into our discussion. I'll start with an introduction of our podcast host, Becky Parks. Becky is co-founder of Connecting Consciousness, and she's the leader of the organization's day-to-day operations. She also oversees CC training and co-authors at CC's monthly spiritual topics. I'll hand over to Becky for additional introductions.
Okay, thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce our podcast co-host, Chris Clifford. Chris has been a CC State Coordinator, the US Central Regional Coordinator, and she currently works with me in training and is the co-author of our monthly spiritual topics. And I'll also introduce our two podcast guests. Grandmother Mulara is a healer, teacher, musician, counsellor, executive coach, academic and consultant. She's an Adna Quiani Barkinji elder and senior Aboriginal law woman and wisdom keeper of grandmother law, white well dreaming and the law of one woman. What Grandmother Mulara loves about her work is raising the vibration of people and communities and working with them to heal their song lines, which contains the strengths and weaknesses of our essence, our humanity. And with this knowledge, people can heal their ancestral line whilst healing themselves and their stories. Sue Cimino is an author, speaker, intuitive and visionary who has been gifted with a deep connection with both grace and the circle of consciousness involved with creation. Through these connections, Sue's unique wholeness alignment work emerged. Ever since, Sue has been helping people around the world align with their divine self and embrace their own wholeness. Sue's greatest passion is empowering people to remember their wholeness and reclaim their sovereignty so they can reach their full potential and bring their unique gifts to the world. So thank you, Grandmother Mulara and Sue, for joining us today and for a series of discussions on our podcasts.
Okay, thank you, Becky, and welcome, Sue and Grandma Mulara. So today we want to start with topics on the ego and authenticity. This is a teaser for our CC members who are listening because our October monthly spiritual topic is on the ego and the authentic self. So in our last podcast, Becky touched on authenticity when she shared that as a young woman, she noticed she was a different person when she was at work versus when she was at home. And also she was different when she was around different people. This realization caused her to ponder who she really was, and she started the search for her true self. I had a similar experience, although my epiphany, it didn't happen until a really big life event, a near fatal house fire where we lost everything. The time it took to get our personal lives back together forced me to stop working so much. And it was really a blessing because it gave me time to take stock of my life. Like Becky, I started to realize I was a different person with different people and in different situations. And the biggest difference was the role I played at work. At that time, I was trying to fit in and I was trying to be who I was supposed to be as I climbed the corporate ladder. Long story short, even though my husband stayed at home with the kids at the time, with his encouragement, I took a leap of faith and left that job that wasn't at all in alignment with who I was. I did return to the corporate world a few years later after a lot of personal and spiritual development. And when I returned, it was more as me. I was happier, even though I was doing the same kind of work, and my team was very happy. but I wasn't always popular with my colleagues and even some of my managers because I regularly questioned the status quo and I questioned accepted corporate paradigms, and my team and I did things differently. And so I think when we start becoming our true selves, we can be viewed as different and sometimes even as a little odd. But for me, being who I am is really worth it. And so I'd like to invite Grandmother Mulara, Sue, and Becky to weigh in on this subject.
Thank you, Chris. So who's going to go first?
I may as well speak. So the affirmation that I've used for the last 30 years, and it was very powerful when I first started using it. I found that it really helped me to give me direction in my life. And that affirmation was to live an authentic life by walking my true spiritual path. I'll say it again, to live an authentic life by walking my true spiritual path. And that's all I needed to focus on. And I had that affirmation up on the fridge, on the mirror in the bathroom, on my wardrobe, to keep reminding myself, to keep planting, bring that in, to live an authentic life by walking my true spiritual path. And here I am. Thank you.
Wonderful. And so the question that comes to my mind is, how can people start, if someone's listening to this, how can they start to walk their true spiritual path? Sue?
Well, I want to slip something in before we get to how to, because I love everything. Like, I love your stories. That was great because we all have that kind of multiple, like we're multiple people inside of here. Like we act this way, that way. And Grandmother Mulara, I love the whole, because you're really talking about the alignment and wholeness, which is right up my alley. It's like what I care about the most. But this morning when I got up early and was pondering this subject, the question that came to mind was, what's underlying? What's the tendency to not be authentic? Like, where does that come from? Because if you talk to people, it's all over the place. People feel not worthy, not good enough. They are afraid to be what comes naturally. And I really, I'm sorry to take it that direction, but I believe it's worthy looking. And there's like assumptions, beliefs, programming, things that we just like, it's in culture, it's in that dumbing down and that suppression of humanity. But there's so much that tells us to stay small and stay little. And as we've becoming more aware, we work with it. Like everyone I know, especially in connecting consciousness, they are working with how to be more authentic, how to, live a truer life. And they're always dealing with these things. And so we've tried to correct this. And this is in so many of us. Some people, it's been through counseling, like years and years of counseling, trying to piece back together or trying to shut off those voices that are always criticizing and doubting self. We try spiritually through, like the whole denial of the ego. The ego is bad, get rid of the ego. There's something about that makes my little spidey senses go, well, what were they trying to do? Like, we wouldn't be created with an ego if it didn't have a purpose. And it might have slid off its purpose and gotten in the way of other things. But what I know from what I've been shown is like the ego has its purpose, perfect function. And if I was going to describe it, I would say, when your soul, spirit, consciousness, and your form, your body, matter came together, they didn't know how to take care of each other. So the ego was designed to kind of give advice to keep both safe. Drink water, run from the tiger, don't put your hand in the fire. But because the ego's voice is so loud and the still small voice inside is so quiet, Like we
Mm.
really started listening more to the ego. And there's been this concerted attempt to derail our wholeness, to split us up. Like if you think of above, as above, so below, if you see how they try to divide everybody in the world, I think they're doing that within us so that we become all these, and we're trying to find our way back together. And we try really hard, but it's like an onion that has no center. Like we're peeling and we're peeling and we're peeling. But unless we get to that underlying programming is a really good word, but it includes like beliefs, assumptions, but a lot of it is programming. Why are we afraid to be us? And I love it when I looked up the definition of wholeness, it's to be unbroken, undamaged. It's like all of you together, not missing pieces, not split up, not trying to please this person and please this person, but to be your aligned, authentic self. You described it beautifully, Grandmother Mulara. So I just, I'm sorry, I did get a download this morning, because even like the traumas that we all experience it splits us up, it fragments, because like when I work with people, I can see where we all have all these inner voices, like some of them are child parts, some of them are like our father's voice, our mother's voice, and they're all trying to keep us in line so that we're safe. Like they criticize us so we don't catch the wrath and the anger, abuse, what judgment of those around us, or they remind us to stay small, or like they're all doing their best to keep us safe. But why do we have to not be us to be safe? Why isn't being authentic safe? And I actually think it is, but I believe it takes throwing off some of that overlay, some of that unconscious stuff, which is why agreement breaking, like that's where I tend to go, like, how do we break? And in many cases, it's been applied collectively across humanity. Collectively, humanity has agreed to some pretty awful things because we didn't know better, because we're kind of like, we're these emerging, amazing, incredible creations. And we didn't know that, that goes into the free will being used against us. I'm just going to add one more thing, because I talked about how we spiritually, we split off the ego and demonize it. I think some of that even comes from the nefarious stuff, as an attempt to split us. And what I have found is, like, the ego has its place under the guidance, under the direct, under the divine self. And then it works perfectly. It doesn't try to run the show, and we're not just listening to that loud voice. We learn how to listen deeper to that small voice. Now, there you have it.
Thank you. So I would like to talk more about that concept of the ego, because there really are so many people who say, even these days, that you have to leave the ego behind, that the ego is bad and you have to leave it behind. So now I've heard you talk about this, and I've also heard Grandmother Mulara talk about this. I had a wonderful personal healing session with Grandmother Mulara. Thank you again for that, Grandmother Mulara. And we talked about ego. And then one of the things that Grandmother Mulara said, which I hadn't heard before, but is that you can have an overinflated ego and you can have an underinflated ego, and both cause challenges for your authentic self. And so, Grandmother Mulara, could you talk about that a little more?
Thanks, Chris. Well, if we think about, so first of all, I'll talk about energy. So yes, we need, our ego is important. It protects us. It tells us when to run, when we've got to run. That it's just, it has a role to play. I agree with that. We need it. And I have a feeling that we've tended to split it into two parts. One part might be, service to self. It's overinflated potentially. And the other might be service to others, overinflate, that underinflates our ego. So if we are giving our power away by being of service to others and over and not filling up our ourselves, like not filling up our energy vehicle, then we are depleting our energy, and we're actually underutilizing our ego. Yes, so underinflation, I suppose, if that's such a word. If our ego is too little, we're giving our power away, we're depleting ourselves. We all know what too much ego might look like. But I think, when we say, oh, well, your ego's in the way, perhaps we could just change that, I suggest, and say, we could suggest to people, how about you get out of the way, which is your own meaning, your own identification with whatever is going on. If we can step out of the way, I suppose it's the ego out of the way, we can allow energy and divinity to flow naturally in our life, in us and in our life. We tend to, with our mind, get ourselves in the way. So I hope that helps. If we're trying to please others, we're actually giving our power away, and therefore we are depleting our energy. And the boundaries I talked about before, we need to have good boundaries, healthy boundaries, not necessarily strong or weak, but healthy boundaries, where we go, yeah, I'm of service. I help my elder up the street, or I help the child make sure that they've got someone at home when they come home from school. I can be there until mum or dad can get home. That's being service to others in right relationship. But if we keep being of service, wanting to be helpful, actually what's happening is that we're really needing to be needed. And I think that neediness can creep in as well. So that's really where I was going with that kind of conversation, that we can be leaking energy, and a healthy boundary will not allow us to do that.
This reminds me very, sorry.
No,
This reminds me very much of, there's times in a person's life when this can be really challenged. For example, the classic situation when I was an antenatal teacher, looking after first-time parents, many fears for first-time mums is losing their identity, losing what they've built up for themselves, their career and who and how they see themselves. And so changing to this whole new role, and it is absolutely a role that's very much of service. You are looking after a newborn baby, a tiny creature that is 100% dependent on you, and for a time in your life, and if you do it again and again, times in one's life, a woman can dedicate many years of real service to self, and some women do lose themselves in that, and some women sort of fight against it and want to sort of maintain their independence. But that is one of the most challenging times in someone's lifetime in terms, and I see that as being a potential fantastic catalyst for really finding out who and what you are. I mean, some women love it, and you don't have to lose your identity. I don't think I did. I think yes, you spend a lot of your time service to your children, as it were, but you can very, very much enjoy that time, that you can learn a lot from them. So it's not just a total, but loss of identity, but many people see it like that. So I just wanted to say that there are times in one's life when we get challenged, and it makes you really consider who and what you are and what you want to do with your life, and how you balance things out. So you get a bit of me time, and you can, as you say, you need to be able to sort of fill up your cup so that you can give to others. You can't constantly be on output and leaking energy, otherwise there's at some point you just have to rest. So I just wanted to say that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that description. I didn't have kids, but I totally get what you're saying. And I love the whole idea about the overinflated and underinflated. And what you've both alluded to is just that balance, like to have it be a balanced position where you're actually listening internally to yourself and knowing when to give, when to take care of yourself, when to because a lot of people go into the service to others with an idea I should, or with that old religious programming, like you're meant to, you know, you're not, it's selfish if you don't give yourself away in that way. And we're pattern breakers in this time and space to really be able to hold ourselves wholly, and be of service, and also take care of ourselves without running amok, becoming arrogant, or becoming self-deprecating. Really, really important. I love what you both shared about that.
Thank you, Sue. I also wanted to talk about, this has certainly been the case for me, but for those who are listening, it's not like you have this epiphany and then you're like, okay, now I'm me and that's it. It feels like it's this lifelong journey, because like I gave my story earlier, and I went back to the corporate world and I was definitely much more me than I was before. But I left the corporate world again a few years ago, and I've become way more me once again. And it makes me realize it's just an ongoing journey. And I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that, or why that is. It feels like we never get there. Maybe Grandmother Mulara, I think you may have touched on this earlier, that it is a journey.
There's two things I could say, but right now I'm feeling that, our heart continues to grow, and our heart moderates our ego. So, the biggest hearted people will be the leaders of our future. The leaders of today are very questionable. The leaders of our future will be heart-centered. And I feel like the more our heart can grow, the more experiences that it comes through, more experiences like what we're talking about. We have to be able to have an opportunity to grow our heart, and it comes and often it comes in response to a challenge. Yes, I can do that for that person. There's nothing in it for me, but I can do that for that person. That's a healthy boundary. The other thing I want to say is that Becky, you asked me just earlier about, well, how would one find their true spiritual path? And then we had a conversation about different ways in which we might be stumbling along. I want to put a question to our listeners. And the question is, are you walking in your wound? Because if you are, then walking that spiritual path may not be actually very spiritual at all, or it might not be very true at all. What it might be is actually a pattern repeating itself of a wound that needs to be healed and cleaned up. And that is life-changing, transformational when that happens. So, if we're walking in our wound, that's actually when sometimes the ego is over-operating. I've got to protect myself because this is how I know myself to be. And yet it might not be you at all. So it's a rhetorical question to ask yourself. Am I walking in my wound? Am I repeating a pattern? And to assist at this time in particular with spiritual tools and skills for how to navigate the challenges ahead, then it is important to be part of a community of people who are teaching those sorts of skills, like we are here. We're having this discussion, but we're also facilitating some knowledge sharing, wisdom, sacred wisdom, so that you actually might hear the words, but people may also feel the resonance in what it is we're sharing. And that is a wonderful way in which you can consider that it's a spiritual tool to be able to feel the resonance of of the message that's behind what we say. So being able to do a course to get some spiritual tools, I'd say some understanding would be good. I've sat in lots of circles for many, many years. And it tended to be at level of where we were at. I'm in a different circle now that is at a much different level. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a really helpful dynamic way to learn about how to navigate this particular issue in your life, if there is one, to talk, to find other people who are experiencing a mutually challenging perspective. And you'll find there's a lot of growth in sharing, because sharing knowledge is more knowledge actually generating. It's not less knowledge, it's more knowledge. So sharing it, and what's worked for you, as I just shared my affirmation, may work for someone else. And you find what sits well for you and what comes through versus, oh no, that bit doesn't resonate. Tuning in to your energy body, what resonates. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, another question arises. If someone is walking in their wound, I'm thinking perhaps their behavior might be quite defensive, because the ego will want to protect that way of life at that time. It will be defensive and, trying to justify why someone is walking in that path and behaving in the way that they do. And I think if you actually think about it, so many people are like that, and it's based as well on judgments, isn't it? There is definitely an element of judgmentalism around that, because again, it's all about barriers, but not necessarily good barriers, but it's about building up.
I think we talked a little bit about that last time, where I know I said, what we judge in others, we get to keep, because it's often in us. So sometimes, and Sue mentioned, or Chris, I'm not sure which one of you, mentioned about, why is it that we peer group pressure? Why is it that we're trying to conform, or we're trying to please others, or conform to the norm? And I think it's because we don't want to be judged. All right. And that is actually the truth of it. And that projection and to be conforming to a norm, sometimes that group is judging others because they don't want to be that one that's out there looking different, dressing different. Whatever the difference is.
You cannot go through life expecting everybody to love you. Whatever you're doing, there's always going to be people who, for whatever reason, just don't like it, and so there's judgment wherever you go, and you can't please everyone. So again, that's another sort of wake-up call to make one think, whatever they do. There's so many people who are on, like, for example, TikTok or whatever, who try and project a certain way that they love, and then they get a load of likes and then some dislikes, and people are probably thinking, why does someone dislike? What's there to dislike about that? But that's just the nature of it, and maybe that sort of thing is helping people go beyond it and learn from it. It can be very, very harsh. That's just another form of peer pressure, but it's one of those things where it can knock you down, or you either rise to the occasion. You either just start to do some reflecting and think, why am I bothered by people who don't like what I'm saying or doing? Shall I just carry on doing it because I enjoy it and I know it's good and it's creative and I'm on the right track? Or do I start to have a think about what I'm really doing with my life, and maybe that's the start of a spiritual journey. There's always something, isn't it? But boundaries is a big one, because people, especially younger people, I'm just thinking, because sometimes, you say the teenage years are the rebellion years, aren't they? And sometimes teenagers decide to rebel against the parents and do things that they know is not particularly lovable or acceptable, but many don't. And
they think we were born this age. Like, we've been there, we know, but they just think, oh no, they just can't imagine that we were teenagers once upon a time. And so they think we're born this age.
So
but yes, you're right.
I would love to comment a couple of things both of you have said, and I'm going to go backwards because that's the order I'm remembering them. The thing that's interesting about others judging us or criticizing us, if the judgment was, oh, you're orange, you would laugh and go, well, that's not true. So the ones that hurt us or that we react to are the ones we really kind of secretly believe about ourselves. And it's easy to go in and go, well, what is that true? Do I think that about myself? Because those are the, they can come up and yell in your face. If you don't have that in you, it isn't going to affect you. That's one of my thoughts. And also, I wish people would, we all are uniquely different, and it's by design. We all, from a soul level, picked what we were going to come here and express. And yet then this peer pressure, like taking that on, trying to fit in. Well, think of a field of wildflowers. They're all wildly different and beautiful and perfect. And if we would just look at us that way and be really grateful that we're not all the same. Can you imagine it like that? You want to talk about hive mind, like if we were all the same, it would be pretty awful. Now, I love the idea of walking in the wound and as a repeating a pattern. I love that. And Becky, you asked a really interesting question about it. There's a victimhood in it too, like there's a hanging on to it. Sometimes it's victimhood, defensiveness, whatever. But from a soul level, when you're coming in here, you pick the lessons you want to learn, and you've got all these helpers and guides that are going to help you, and they will bring around this challenge in your face. And if you miss it, then we'll bring it around again. Like if it's betrayal, you're going to keep finding men that betray you, or women, or whoever. If it's, like whatever it is, it's because you asked, I want to learn this. And when you think I guess it's like you believe that you're just a victim of what's happening and that it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It just keeps happening to you. Well, if you could get like, what am I love the question, like, are you walking in a wound? Well, what is it I need to learn from this? And then I ask your guides and helpers, like, how do I, like, what do I need to know? Ask God, ask creation, whoever you ask, help me find what it is I need to know so that I can move past this wounding. I don't want to carry it anymore. Now, what you can hear is that taking responsibility. I'm not a victim of it. I can own this and find a way through it because I now have the power to do so. Whereas when we just think we're just oh, my childhood and I've got this to carry and blah, 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 it's like we're in this place of we really need to be empowered to claim ourselves. And then we find our spiritual path because we own ourselves. We're not victims. We're not buffeted about by. We laugh when they call us orange. It's so anyway, those are my thoughts.
I'm reminded of a catchphrase that we use in the teaching circles that I take, and because some people might be saying, well, how would you know you're in your wound, or how did but what if you're in that wound, you can't get out of it? Check with yourself. And the check that I'm just going to suggest, completely opposite of what we've been talking about, but it's as simple as, does this give me joy? If this does not give you joy, get out of it, or stop it, or change it. ask yourself, is this giving me joy? To be a grumble bum, you know, to keep arguing with people, regurgitating, blaming others. Is this giving you joy? What gives you joy? It would give me joy to drop all that. It gives me joy to walk through those wildflowers that Sue was talking about. That would give me joy. So there's another tip.
And
Do what gives you joy.
it could be that simple to heal that wounding. Like the decision to step out could be all it takes to heal that wounding. I love that.
Mhm.
I love that question too. I think it also circles us back to authenticity, because when you figure out what brings you joy, you become more of your authentic self too. So that's a beautiful question on many fronts.
And for the mothers, you know, in the world, what's giving them joy when there's service to their child and their children growing up and there's a great dependency? Actually, you know, it gives them joy to be caring for their children. Actually, there's a joy in that. So I just put it out there that, well done, thank you to the mothers of the world and the grandmothers who've also been part of that mothering circle. Let's have more of it, more joy.
Yeah, more
And
joy in the nurturing and watching children grow and, you know, flourish and find their own identity. And I think that's a huge joy in that. And I think another thing, you know, Sue was just talking, there's the intention as well when you and Grandmother Mulara, when you step out of the victimhood, having that awareness, coming to that realization, and then having the oh God, what's the word I just used? The intention to do different, to be different. That's the most important thing. A lot of it is about intention, because then you know you're on the right path when you are wanting to choose, you're making the active choice to walk a different path and to step into the joy and to find the joy, you know.
It can be in the smallest of things.
And one of the things you started to ask earlier, Becky, was how do people start moving into their authentic spiritual path or their authentic self? And I think you've hit it, like that intention. Even if every day you don't know how, you don't need to know how. You don't need to know how it's going to happen, how to unfold, what to do, but simply stating it. And I love, I am willing. We've undermined I am willing as a thing that, oh, I will allow it, or I'm okay with it. No, I am willing. I am using my free will and the choice that I'm making. I am willing to find my authenticity. I am willing to walk my spiritual path. I am willing to understand this wounding so that I can heal it. I am willing to discover how to have a balanced ego. Like even simple willingness for those things will start the process. Because if you ask all that is creation, your guides, helpers, whoever, like however, like if you ask, you'll be given answers. And I always, me, the rock, I go, and tell me in a way I can hear, like make it really obvious. If I miss it, bring it around again, because you will be given assistance as you are choosing something that is so for your greatest good and in full alignment.
Here.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to just throw out there, well, first I wanted to comment on something Grandmother Mulara said, because Grandmother Mulara, you were talking about the importance of sharing wisdom and being with a group of people where you can talk about these things. And I thought that was a great description of connecting consciousness. So I just wanted to point that out. I also wanted to just touch on, we've shared like a lot of information here. And if anyone out there is feeling a little overwhelmed by all of it, thinking, oh, where do I start? That in one of the monthly spiritual topics that Becky and I had worked on, which was around raising your vibration, we talked about creating a joy mind map, which is just really making a list, or like I have a big whiteboard with little stickies on it that say, here are the things that bring me joy. And we've talked about the huge benefit of doing things that bring you joy and how it makes you more authentic. And even if you're starting to feel like your cup is getting low and you need to recharge yourself, just every day you can make a commitment to do one of those things that bring you joy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's a commitment to yourself, isn't it? And it's, yeah, no, that's lovely.
And a commitment to self is something that in your authenticity and your spiritual path. Like if we don't care for ourselves, like if we don't own ourselves and care for ourselves as if we're worthy and deserving, because we are worthy and deserving.
Absolutely, that's so important. And I think another thing I wanted to touch upon is, and it's something that we will do, I think, a lot in our talks, is what we call the matrix and the programming and the sort of layers that we are subjected to, the like the hive mind, the group thinking, like, you know, the rules that the governments place on us, that society does, that our local community does. And, you know, we grow up with a lot of these filters and programmings, and, you know, the TV telling us what's going on in the world and is this really true. So we are bombarded constantly with information and like stimulation, and it's sometimes very difficult to sort it all out in your mind and to filter out what's not important and to know what is important and what's not important. And so that is moving on to intuition. So part of the whole process of developing one's spiritual self and understanding what's moral, what's authentic, you need to be able to intuit what is authentic in the outside world, as well as what, you know, find your own authentic path. And this is you know, so above, so below, you know, what's above is below, and, you know, what's inside reflected on the outside. So I just wondered if we could just spend a few moments talking about some of the challenges that we are faced in this modern world that prevents us from finding our true self. And or maybe it helps us because it enables us to say, no, I don't agree with that, or yes, I do agree with that. You know, we can see it both ways, but many of us have woken up and we've all got our waking up story. You know, we all have our own personal story of what triggered us to wake up and how we woke up, and the sort of, you know, the order in which we discovered things that are going on in the world. And that does bring rise to one's own personal spiritual journey, because it enables you to decide what you believe is true and what's not. And it makes you more aware of perhaps resonance and what you resonate with and what you don't resonate with, which then makes you perhaps more aware of vibration, which might then make you more aware of the fact that we are all just energy vibrating. I mean, these are just, I'm just jumping from one concept to another, but these are parts of the things that we do discover when we start to wake up. But I just want to have a discussion on some of the mind control that's everyday and programming that is created to perhaps keep people in a dumbed down position where perhaps they just don't want to think about what's actually going on in the world. They don't want to really think beyond their own little life because they don't really understand. And I'm not being, that might sound like I'm being really rude, but for many people, they just don't want to think about what's going on in the world because they think it doesn't really affect them. And I think what is happening in the world is becoming more and more blindingly obvious that it's trying to prompt people to think, hang on a moment, why have we got to this situation? You know, why are food prices and gas prices rising beyond belief? Why what are the judgments and decisions that have led to that, got us in the state that we are today? So I'm sorry, I've sort of gone on a whole long ramble, but there is so much
that's
going
a
on
big
in the
topic.
It is, but there's a lot going on in the world that
Yes.
affects us. And
Yes.
how does it affect us? And what can we do about that? And how can we manage ourselves in that situation? Or do we just ignore it and just trying to carry on with our lives?
Well, we can't, because we're actually all moving into unity consciousness. It is happening.
Which is
And
not
we're the-
hive mind. It is a whole
Yeah.
different thing.
And that unity consciousness means that we're, you know, if one is harmed, all are harmed is kind of the thing. And if one is healed, all are healed, you know, but we're actually moving to that place. And I want to answer or respond to your question by saying there's a key word here, and that's discernment. We need to be able to learn to discern when someone's speaking to us, or we're getting a message in the cosmos, or the television's blah 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 giving you this message. We are actually being called to discern between what is a truth in terms of a message or not. Now, we have been under that matrix. I don't know if I said this last time about being on a Dodgem car. Did I say anything about that last time? I can't remember. Did I say anything about being in a Dodgem car last time? I can't remember which group I've spoken about what to. Or let me tell you, okay, now that I brought it up. And you know the Dodgem cars at the sideshows? Well, they've got they run on a electrical current up top, all right? So imagine the matrix is that electrical current, the older matrix. And we're going around and we're bumping into each other, but we're still on that same current. We're not really getting anywhere. But that current, it doesn't enable us to go anywhere or to recognize the truth while we're still on that current. What I say to people is pull your contact out and go and take your Dodgem car elsewhere and plug it into, you know, to see how different it can be. So I just use that as an idea of how the matrix works. You know, it's right above us. It's like a big net, or has been a big net over us. In fact, there's been a few layers of them. And, you know, the mind control is a really big one, especially here in Australia. But there's been it's a really strong one. And that's taken some doing to unpick it. Another, you know, and it's got a lot of false beliefs in there. There's false things like we should always believe the government looks after us, or, you know, actually even driving on which side of the road, you know, that's all in the matrix. And I think we need to learn, as that's coming apart, we're giving an opportunity now in this day and age to really think for ourselves and not be bombarded by external stimuli or external points of control. And the skill of discernment is the skill we need to develop, to really discern, how will I feel if I do that? What are the repercussions if I follow that through? And how would I feel if I do this other thing, and what are those repercussions? But Becky, there is another layer to this, and I'm not sure if you want to go there in this particular podcast, but that's around the whole, who's talking to you in that field. all the entities and nefarious beings. I'm not sure if you want to actually go there, but there's that too. And we need to, and I can tell you how to discern them, give you a tip. So if you find any being or whoever you think is telling you that you'll be a guru, if you follow that, you know, the ego's puffed up. Follow me, you'll be a guru, you're the guru, you know, you have all of the font of all the knowledge and information. Well, I'm going to say the tip is check who is giving you that information, all right? And say to them, do you love me unconditionally? And check what happens. Are they still talking to you or have they stopped? And if they're still there, you say, do you love me unconditionally? Now, if they're a nefarious being, I don't mean to be in your energy field, they will disappear by the third time you ask. They won't be there. Because the true light, the true divine connection, the authentic connection will not be telling you what to do. It's a feeling of love and bliss. So discernment, my friends.
That's beautiful. Now, Chris and I did a monthly spiritual topic on intuition and discernment. And someone, I'm not sure who, but there's a famous phrase that discernment is one of the hardest skills to learn. It's a very advanced spiritual skill, but it's important to try, and it's important to practice. And also not be afraid to get it wrong. You know, when it's, you know, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again, you know. And when we were discussing the spiritual topic of intuition and discernment, I remember one of the things I was talking about was the centers in your physical body, the spiritual centers that connect with your physical body. A lot of people know about the chakras and the 7 main chakras running from the head down to the base chakra at the base of your spine. But there's the Taoist and old Celtic traditions, and I'm sure others too, talk about 3 main energy centers, and those are in the mental ones in your head, and then the heart center is in the emotional ones in the heart, and then the physical center is in the gut. And these 3 centers in our physical body are very highly have very highly condensed nerve endings. You know, we all know the brain is just a ball of nerves, but also the heart has a lot of electrical nervous energy, and so does the gut. And interestingly, these 3 energy centers are also very heavily supplied with the good bacteria, which really interesting research is showing that good bacteria is very, very important for our physical, mental, and emotional well-being, which is, I think, fascinating. But if one can align these 3 energy centers and tune into them, so you tune into your gut feeling, and we know, what does my gut say about this? And tune into the heart and the emotional side, and what does my heart tell me about this? And then tune into your head and say, what do I really think about this? And then try and align all 3. Recognize if they're all telling you different things, and note that and say, well, my head's telling me this, my heart's telling me that, my gut's telling me that, and figure out why, and just figure out, maybe it takes time to learn which was right, you know, in the end. But
I give you a 4th one.
Oh, go on then.
For Aboriginal Australia, we have 4. The 4th one is soles of our feet.
Connecting to the ground, I suppose, yeah.
Or spiritual path with practical feet. Yeah.
Love it, yeah.
Which was one of people's favorite takeaway from our last talk, was that comment. I've seen it all over the place. So thank you for that. Even I was like, wow, I love it. So I'm going to weave in through some of what you both have said. I have always thought of, well, we are in this huge transition. Like even if you look at it astrologically, we're going from Piscean age, authority, people that, you know, the teachers, the students, the powers, the minions, into the age of Aquarius, where there's community, there's tribe, there's connectedness, there's unity. And this is the transition we're all in. And, you know, it's like there's a lot, like most of, I would say a major amount of all the people, even in Connecting Consciousness, have come here at this time and place to assist humanity in this transition. And so we are undermining all of that old, like it's, you know, some people are just learning about all the programming and the mind control and all the things hitting us. Others have known for a while, but we are in that process of discerning. And I always, because I had a few spiritual awakenings long before I discovered what was going on in the world, but I always felt like an awakening. Like, okay, I've opened up a little bit, more is coming in, and then you have to learn how to navigate and discern. Like, it's learning how to navigate the new landscape. And it's easy to, like, there are moments when you know, okay, this is authentic or this is divine. You can tell your higher thoughts. You can also tell the ones that are just like straight down here, full-blown ego, 3D, you know, whatever. It's that gray area in between that was the challenge for me. And I'm sure most people, like, okay, you've got this gray area, you're practicing, you're learning. It's like a baby that keeps falling down and getting up and falling down and getting up. You don't, like, we tend to want things to be, okay, all of a sudden I'm awake and it's this way. It happened to a few people, not most of us. You're practicing, you're you know, going between and learning, oh, this feels this way, this feels this way, and discovering how to move up here when you're stuck down there, or what causes you, like, what is watching that television show about horrific things, does that clunk you back down here? Maybe. So you're just discovering how to allow more, and I always say grace, but it's that divine, that life, that love, that all, allow more of that in, and do less of the things that clunk you down. And we're just in this learning process, like, as we, like, I love Grandmother Mulara, what you said about this is when if one heals, everyone is healed. It's like a unity thing, as each one of us, and this is why I love working with the Connecting Consciousness people, as we all start making choices to lighten up, to remember more, to take personal sovereignty, it's affecting the whole human collective. We may not notice it right away. We may still seem to be surrounded by people that aren't awake, but man, I've said it for years, I don't believe everybody has to have a spiritual awakening. As we shift and lift the collective, people that are just down, like very ordinary, it's gonna start burbling up. It's just gonna be like, and they're gonna start becoming kinder and gentler and more for the good of everyone, without even knowing why, without having to think about it or be spiritual or whatever. It's just going to start happening as they move into their authenticity.
That's the 100th monkey effect, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think as well, those of us that are awake and aware and that are working on our spiritual development and our spiritual journey and tuning into our own authenticity and learning to develop discernment, we are the way showers. And we have to, it's a duty to try to help others. You know, I feel it is anyway. In a way, in the ways that we can, whether it's, you know, in a grand way or whether it's in a little everyday way, it doesn't really matter. But for everybody that does that, and there are hundreds of people around the world, thousands that are doing this, they will be creating a new paradigm. And others that are, for whatever reason, are more followers than way showers, they will follow the new way showers who are guiding us into this new spiritual way. And as you know, Sue has said, it's, I don't want to say it's inevitable, but it's in the stars. It is in the stars, and it is part of our Mother Earth's development as well. And we are piggybacking on the back of that, but also doing work and working with Mother Earth as well. So it's complicated. It's very beautiful, and I hope that that everyone will join us. I have high hopes. I have great expectations, and feel a lot of love for humanity and Mother Earth, and I'm excited about this process. So I just wanted to say that.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering now, I mean, we've been chatting away for about an hour or so, and I'm wondering if it's perhaps time to wrap this episode up. And I guess with that, I wanted to ask each of you just one thing that you feel that you've learned from this podcast, or feels outstanding, or you'd like to remind our viewers of, or just anything else that you'd like to share.
I think we've talked about knowing oneself in the beginning, the first part of this podcast. But if you don't know who you are, it's okay. Start. Take a foot forward. Take another foot forward. And then you're on the right path. You know, we didn't know who we were. We weren't born this age. But, you know, we too had to, you know, work out how to grow our heart with practical feet. And so just start. And if you've already begun your journey, wonderful. Then perhaps you can find another to walk alongside, another one to walk with you, and then another, and then another. And soon enough, you will find there are others just like you in their unique spirit soul who want to walk together. And that is walking towards, in fullness, towards unity consciousness. Nanga.
Nanga, thank you very much, Grandmother Mulara. Sue?
Well, I am going to say something pretty similar. Like, a lot of people ask me about what's my path, what's my purpose, but the thing that is most important is to own yourself, like discover yourself, own yourself. Without that, the path and purpose, you're probably not going to get where you are intending to go. And yet when you own yourself fully and allow your authenticity, your unique expression to arise and to start expressing, your path will be unfolding before you with ease and grace. And you will then discover that up till this point, you were being led and guided and trained, and it will continue on, but you'll be moving from a place of personal integrity and strength with that taproot into the divine, your divine self and beyond, and your taproot into the earth. And from that place, that foundation of being, knowing you, fully you won't have all the questions. Like, it will become so beautiful and so much fun to just move along that path. So start, like she said, just start.
Thank you, Sue, and Grandmother Mulara. So I also want to just remind everyone that it's a journey. There's not like a light switch you turn on and you're like, okay, I'm there now. It's just an ongoing journey. And that really, just by each step taking to become more of you, just being you is of so much benefit to everything that it is to all of humanity. So don't listen to all this and be like, okay, now I have to do this and I have to do this. Just take a step toward becoming more you.
And I want to add, we will love you unconditionally.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's beautiful. For me, I really, walking the wounded path, that was, I found that really interesting, and I sort of recognize that. And I also think, making the intention to step out of that and walk in your true authentic path and find your true authentic path. I think that there could be times when you switch from one to the other quite a lot, and there will often be moments when one switches back into old patterns. But if you can stalk the self, recognize when you're doing this, and flip out of it as quick as possible, then you will be doing yourself a service. And that's just something that has come to my mind from all of this. And it's been wonderful. Thank you all very, very much for our lovely chats today. And thank you to the viewers as well. I just wanted to say we got some absolutely wonderful comments, and it was lovely to hear and know and feel that we are on the right track with this, and people appreciate it. And so I hope that people enjoy this as well when this comes out.